So imagine walking into a hospital where patients are waiting for hours, and a manufacturing plant where products are constantly rejected, or a government office where customers keep returning because their applications were processed incorrectly. What do all these situations have in common? They are quality problems. Now, here is the interesting part. Studies by renowned quality expert Karau Ishakau showed that nearly 95% of quality-related problems can be identified and solved using just 7 simple tools. Welcome to this channel. Today we are exploring the 7 quality control tools, also known as the 7 juicy tools. The practical techniques that form the backbone of every effective quality management system and support organizations implementing ISO 9001. Whether you work in a manufacturing company, in a healthcare industry, in a banking industry, government, education, or any service industry, these tools will provide you, will make you make better decisions based on evidence rather than assumptions. So why do we need the 7 juicy tools? One of the biggest mistakes organizations make is trying to solve problems using opinions. Someone says, I think the issue is poor training. And another one says, no, it's because staff don't care. Someone else blames the software. But quality professions don't rely on guesses, they rely on facts. The 7 quality control tools help us collect data, analyze it, identify patterns, discover root cause analysis, and monitor improvements. This aligns perfectly with ISO 9001 principles of evidence-based decision making. So let's look at each tool. The number one is the check sheet. The check sheet is the simplest tool. Think of it as a structured form used to collect data consistently. Instead of relying on memory, employees simply record each occurrence of a problem as it happens. Imagine a customer service center receiving complaints. Rather than saying, received many complaints about delays, staff record every complaint, and by the end of the week, they discover that 52 complaints about delayed responses, 18 about incorrect information, 11 about system downtime, and then 7 about road service. Now they have evidence instead of assumptions. What gets measured gets managed. The tool number 2 is the Pareto chart. Once data has been collected, the next question becomes, which problem should we solve first? This is where the Pareto chart comes in. Based on the famous 80-20 principle introduced by Pareto, tells us that roughly 80% of the problems often come from about 20% of the causes. Suppose you have organizational experiences, 120 delayed approvals, 70 document errors, 20 payment delays, 10 IT issues. A Pareto chart immediately shows that delayed approvals are the biggest contributor. Rather than trying to solve everything at once, you focus where improvement will have the greatest impact. Work smarter, not harder. The tool number 3 is the cause and effect diagram, also known as the fishbone or Ishikawa diagram. Once you have identified the biggest problem, you now ask, why is this happening? Instead of blaming people, you explore every possible cause. Typical categories include people, processes, machines, materials, methods, measurement, environment. Suppose customer waiting time is increasing. Possible causes could include insufficient training, poor scheduling, slower computer systems, complex approval procedures, lack of training, incomplete customer information. By mapping every possible cause, teams avoid jumping to conclusions and investigate systematically. The tool number 4 is the histogram. A histogram helps us understand variation. Quality is not just about averages, it's about consistency. Imagine measuring the processing time for 100 applications. Some take 10 minutes, others 20, others 45, others 2 hours. A histogram shows the distribution of this data. It quickly reveals whether the process is stable, predictable, or highly inconsistent. Organizations cannot improve what they don't understand. Tool number 5 is the scatter diagram. Sometimes we suspect two variables are connected, but are they? A scatter diagram helps answer the question. Imagine comparing employee training hours against number of processing errors. If errors decrease as training increases, the points form a clear downward trend. This indicates a relationship. If the dots appear completely random, there may be no meaningful connection. The scatter diagram prevents organizations from making expensive decisions based on assumptions. The 7th tool is the control chart. Every process naturally varies. The real question is the variation normal or is something unusual happening? A control chart helps distinguish between common variation and special variation. Suppose your department normally processes applications within 5 days. Suddenly, processing time jumps to 12 days. The control chart immediately signals that something abnormal has occurred. Perhaps it could be a system failure, staff shortages, network downtime, or policy changes. Instead of reacting emotionally to use fluctuations, managers respond only when evidence indicates that the intervention is needed. Tool number 7 is about the flow charts and process mapping. Every product or service follows a process. A flow chart visualizes that journey from beginning to end. For example, customer submits application receives, documents verified, to approval, to payment, to completion. Once the process is visible, teams immediately identify duplicate approvals, unnecessary signatures, repeated data entry, waiting time, process bottlenecks. Many organizations discover that the biggest quality problems are actually poor process design rather than poor employee performance. Now let's look at how the 7 quality control tools work together. The real power comes when these tools are used together. First, collect data using a check sheet. Next, prioritize issues using a Pareto chart. Then identify root causes using a fishbone diagram. Then start the variations with a histogram. Then confirm relationships using a scatter diagram. Monitor improvements using a control chart. And finally, design the process using a flow chart. Together, these tools create a structured, evidence-based approach to continuous improvement. The next chapter now looks at how these tools support ISO 9001. ISO 9001 is not about creating paperwork. It is about improving organizational performance. The 7 control tools support many ISO 9001 requirements, including Clause 6, which looks at risk-based thinking by identifying potential sources of problems. Clause 9, which looks at performance evaluation by collecting and analyzing performance data. Clause 10, which looks at improvement by identifying root causes and implementing corrective actions. Organizations that use these tools consistently make better decisions, reduce waste, improve customer satisfaction, and build confidence in their quality management systems. So, as we conclude, quality is not achieved through luck. It is achieved through disciplined observation, accurate data, and continuous improvement. The 7 control tools have remained relevant for decades because they are simple, practical, and effective. You don't need expensive software to begin improving quality. You simply need the willingness to observe, measure, analyze, and improve. Remember, quality begins with facts. Facts begin with data, and data becomes improvement when we use right tools. Thank you for listening to me. Ladies and gentlemen, I remain Senyimba Chizito.